I've mentioned in previous videos how Jeff Beck is the quintessential guitarist, and that reputation is well deserved due to his overall musicality and his incredible technique, as well as his imagination. But I think there's an aspect of Jeff Beck's guitar playing and artistry that doesn't get enough attention, and I'm going to let Eric Clapton explain a little bit about what that is right here. So let's listen into what Eric Clapton had to say right here.
And his technique, even then, I think he refined it too. I mean, when I last saw him play in America last year, I was watching him on YouTube. We were doing gigs in Europe, and I was really getting down, and I was not well. I still had the COVID, and I was playing gigs, and I'd go back to my room, and I'd find Jeff's gig from the night before, and I'd watch that, and it would lift me up to where I could be able to work that night for my thing. Wow. Because to me, it seemed like he'd moved on. He'd constantly been moving up a notch all the time, every year. The refinement in his right hand and the independence between the fingers is so phenomenal.
It's interesting that Clapton remarked how Jeff Beck was able to be an inspiration for him even when he felt as though he wasn't particularly motivated to play and was feeling really down on himself and his health wasn't in the best of shape. But what I find even more interesting is how Clapton commented on Jeff Beck's continual growth curve. So Jeff Beck is one of those guitar players who never stopped improving, and believe it or not, that's very rare when it comes to guitar players. So if you take a guitarist like Jimmy Page or Ritchie Blackmore or even someone like Jimi Hendrix, a lot of their incredible, most memorable playing takes place early on in their career. For guitarists like Jimmy Page, the preponderance of his remembered work was done fairly early on in his career. And if you were to see him play now, you would say, well, I love Jimmy Page and he's great and he played the songs like I expected him to, but he's not shown the same pattern of growth from, say, 1980 to now that he showed from, say, 1966 to 1976. And this is usually the case for a guitar player. So Clapton's observation about Jeff Beck is very interesting. Now I'd like for you to listen to something that Ritchie Blackmore had to say about Jeff Beck. Let's listen into that real quick.
The Yardbirds started the whole thing rolling. I think it was 64. And I think I was in Hamburg at the time, Germany. And I first heard The Shapes of Things with Jeff Beck playing. And I thought, my God, who the hell is this? This shouldn't be allowed. It's too good. And I've been a fan of theirs ever since. I think their producer was Giorgio Gomelsky at the time. And they were way ahead of all the other bands. They were fantastic. Shapes of Things, Over, Under, Sideways Down, all that stuff. Amazing guitar playing by Jeff. Jeff cheats on the guitar because he has notes that I don't have on my guitar. So that's okay. I'll let him go on that one. But he knows how to ring a note. His soul comes through his tone as well as his notes. And great player, my favorite guitar player. And every time I tell him that, he'll say, oh, Blackmore, come on, stop bullshitting, I'm going, Jeff, you can never take a compliment, because he's kind of an introverted guy. He loves his cars, but what a player, what a natural, fantastic player. And I'm so glad that he started it because, in my opinion, Shapes of Things made the whole, ever since then, we've just kind of followed that style. In fact, I did a session with Jeff Beck and Jimmy Page back in, I think it was 63, a long time ago. And Jeff and I were the guitar players and Jimmy Page was producing. And I remember Jeff playing incredibly well. And I actually said to him, Jeff, I said to him, what is your name? He said, Jeff Beck. And I said, I've never heard of you. I should have heard of you because you're so good. And then we let that go, and about 3 years later, I saw him somewhere else. And he was a very big name at that point. And he came up to me and said, what was your name? And I said, well, Richie. He said, oh, I've never heard of you. So he paid me back. But I didn't mean it as an insult. It was just for someone to be that good, and for me not to have heard of them on the circuit in 63, 64, was unusual. But he still has his own tone, his own way of playing. He obviously doesn't sit there and practice all these fast little runs. He just is himself. And I think that's brilliant.
So the idea of searching and the idea of exploring and the idea of looking at the guitar as a way of, almost conquering new territory is something that every guitarist has at some point in their career. But most guitarists tend to lose this spirit somewhere along the line, or at least it becomes so greatly diminished that it no longer plays the primary motivational role in what they're doing. So in other words, many guitarists are hit by the lightning bolt of adventure and discovery, but once they find something, once they gain a voice, they're apt to slow down or maybe almost stop altogether in their forward progress. Or you could take a guitar player like Steve Vai, who has never stopped evolving and changing and growing, but it's arguable whether or not all of his exploration and technique building has resulted in him being a better player than he was back in the days when he played with David Lee Roth. And the same could be said for Joe Satriani. Now, what I want to ask from you is give me some names and guitar players where I'm wrong, where they do show a continual growth pattern like what Eric Clapton and Ritchie Blackmore are talking about here. I'd be interested to see which guitarists make your list for those who have continuously evolved over their careers. My idea that most guitarists reach a level of proficiency and then kind of level out is something that I've heard Michael Schenker also mention, that you make a lot of rapid progress on the guitar early on in your career sometimes, and then you basically attain refinements and little increases, and you get better at polish and you get better at this and that and the other, but you don't make the same kind of leaps and bounds that you made early on. And I'm a guitarist myself, of course not a professional musician, just strictly a hobbyist, but I've been playing for a long time, and I would say in my case, it's exactly like that. I started off making a lot of rapid progress, but then after that, it's just basically refining the things I learned to do, and I find it harder and harder and harder to make progress on the guitar unless I were to, sit down and make a study of it, take a lesson or look at a YouTube video and really knuckle down and study the guitar. Just playing for fun and self-gratification like I do, I only get better basically at doing the things I already know how to do. I don't learn that much that's new. And my guitar playing probably sounds about the same now as it did, 10 years ago. And that's true for a lot of guitar players. So I think it must be something that's kind of innate to guitar playing, that most players find a comfortable zone where they can feel adequate in their self-expression, and then they sort of level out. And one of the reasons that this might be the case is because it's so pleasurable to play the guitar once you have developed some sort of acuity with it, that the struggle part is something that you want less and less to do with, because it is really hard to learn to play the guitar at first, especially if, like me, you're not natively talented at it. You have to work at it. So the guitar is kind of a demanding instrument for some people. And so it would make sense, at least to me, that a guitarist, once they develop some fluidity, would just concentrate on polishing and perfecting their style rather than making leaps and bounds in progress. So what I'd like to hear from you is your thoughts on that, on the stages of developing, particularly if you are a guitarist, but also your ideas, like I said, about guitarists out there that don't seem to follow this mode of quick development and then leveling off. This is what I think, but what really matters is what you think. So if you have an idea about this or any other topic connected to classic or contemporary music, please drop it in the section below and remember to like and subscribe. Thanks a lot.